From the outside, the Hurst family looked like something out of a suburban dream. Their two-story brick house on a quiet North Carolina street was always immaculate. Trimmed hedges, wind chimes by the porch, a flag that never faded. To the neighbors, Daniel and Laura Hurst were the couple everyone admired. He was the steady one, a high school guidance counselor. She, a real estate agent with a warm smile and sharp business sense. And then there was Emily, Laura's daughter from her first marriage, 19, home for the summer after her freshman year at college. But perfection, like polished glass, hides its cracks. Daniel often sat alone on the back porch in the evenings, watching the sun slip behind the oaks, his hands wrapped around a glass of bourbon. He wasn't lonely for company, he was lonely for connection. Over the years, his marriage had grown cold. Laura was always working, always talking about listings and clients, barely noticing the distance that stretched between them. At first, Daniel told himself it was normal. All marriages settle, all passion fades. But lately, the silence had begun to feel like punishment. "You barely talk to me anymore," he said one night as Laura scrolled through her phone. "I'm just tired, Daniel. You know how it is. I'll be better tomorrow." Tomorrow never came. When Emily returned home for the summer, she brought a kind of light that Daniel hadn't felt in years. She was vibrant, funny, with that unfiltered honesty of someone too young to be cautious. She'd talk to him over breakfast, ask him about his day, tease him for being old-fashioned, and for the first time in a long time he felt seen. He told himself it was fatherly affection, the pride of watching a young woman grow confident, responsible, independent. But sometimes, when Emily smiled, he caught himself staring too long, the guilt settling like a stone in his chest. The thought repulsed him. "She's your stepdaughter," he'd remind himself. But thoughts have a way of returning, darker each time, dressed in new excuses. Laura, meanwhile, seemed blind to the undercurrent running through her home. She was consumed by her new listing, a luxury property by the lake that could double her yearly commission. She left early, came home late, and when she was home, she was exhausted. "Just 2 more months," she told Daniel, half asleep one night. "Then we'll go somewhere nice. Maybe the coast." He nodded. But by then, Daniel had already started noticing how Emily laughed when she watched old movies with him, how her eyes softened when she thanked him for small things. She reminded him of the kind of warmth he thought he'd lost forever. Outside, the crickets sang in the dark. Inside, the perfect family drifted quietly toward ruin, and no one, not even Daniel, could see how far the fall would be. Laura left early on a Thursday morning, suitcase rolling across the driveway, her phone pressed to her ear even as she kissed Daniel goodbye. The engine of her SUV faded down the street, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than usual. Inside, Daniel stood by the window, coffee cup in hand, watching until the car disappeared. The house, usually alive with Laura's constant phone calls and energy, felt strangely peaceful. Emily came downstairs moments later, hair damp, dressed in an oversized hoodie. "Mom gone already?" she asked. "Yeah," Daniel said. "Big deal at the lake house." "She's always got a big deal," Emily murmured, half smiling. For the first time, Daniel noticed the way she smiled, warm, genuine, unguarded. It lingered longer than it should have. The next few days passed in an unexpected rhythm. They cooked together, or rather, Emily cooked and Daniel pretended to help, chopping vegetables too slowly while she teased him. They watched old movies late at night, both stretched out on the couch, a comfortable distance between them that slowly began to shrink. Daniel told himself it was harmless. 2 people filling the silence Laura had left behind. But there was something magnetic in those quiet moments. One evening, rain tapped against the windows. Emily sat curled up on the sofa, a blanket draped over her knees, eyes fixed on the flickering screen. Daniel watched her laugh at a scene he'd seen 100 times before, but it wasn't the movie that held his attention. It was her laughter, full, careless, alive. He turned away quickly, ashamed. "You okay?" Emily asked softly, catching his expression. "Yeah, just tired." "You work too much," she said. "You should relax sometimes." Her tone was innocent, but her eyes lingered, curious, searching. For a fleeting second, Daniel felt the room tilt, as if the air itself had changed. He excused himself, retreating to the kitchen. His hands trembled as he poured another drink. The reflection in the glass door caught him. A man older than he felt, lonelier than he admitted. That night he couldn't sleep. He kept hearing her laugh echoing down the hall, soft as a memory, dangerous as temptation. Days blurred into one another. Emily started waiting for him after work, asking about his day, bringing him coffee the way Laura used to years ago. She didn't mean anything by it, or maybe she did. It was hard to tell anymore. On Saturday afternoon, they painted the fence together. She flicked a drop of paint onto his arm, giggling. He grabbed the brush, pretending to retaliate, and for a moment they stood too close, her breath warm, her eyes bright. The laughter faded into silence, and neither of them moved. "You've got paint on your face," she whispered. He stepped back, his heart pounding, forcing a laugh that didn't sound real. That night, Daniel sat awake long after she'd gone to bed, replaying that single moment. The smile, the closeness, the way it made him feel alive again. Outside, the rain started again. Slow, steady, insistent. And by the time Laura's call came the next morning, Daniel already knew that something inside him had shifted. The storm rolled in without warning, heavy clouds swallowing the last traces of light, thunder echoing through the empty streets. Inside the Hurst house, lamps flickered as rain battered the windows. Daniel sat at the kitchen table, half a glass of bourbon in front of him, listening to the water drum against the roof. Laura was still out of town, another showing scheduled that weekend. Emily had spent the evening studying upstairs, music playing faintly through her door. The house felt both alive and lonely, a contradiction Daniel had grown used to. He told himself he would go to bed early, that he'd stay in his room, that tonight would be ordinary. But the mind, when restless, hunts for danger the way a wound seeks air. A knock of thunder shook the glass panes. A moment later, soft footsteps descended the stairs. Emily appeared, barefoot, wearing a large sweater that fell just above her knees. Her hair was loose, shadows framing her face. "The power keeps flickering," she said. "It's kinda creepy up there." "Yeah," Daniel answered, clearing his throat. "Storm's rough tonight." She hesitated, then sat across from him. The candle on the table flickered between them, its light trembling like a secret trying to stay hidden. They talked about nothing, about everything. School, movies, the rain. Each word stretched the silence tighter, until it hummed. "You know," she said softly, tracing the rim of her glass of water. "I used to think you didn't like me much when Mom first married you." "I liked you," he replied, his voice low. "I just didn't know how to be what you needed. You're doing fine now." The sentence hung there, fragile, dangerous, sincere. Lightning flashed, illuminating her face for a heartbeat. She smiled faintly, and something inside Daniel cracked open. The years of neglect, the loneliness, the quiet ache. All of it rose like a tide he could no longer hold back. He stood to refill his drink. She followed. When he turned, she was closer than before. The air smelled of rain and her shampoo. "You should go upstairs," he whispered. "I don't want to," she said. The thunder swallowed the next sound. A glass tipping, a breath catching, a line blurring in the dark. When the lights flickered back to life, the room looked the same. Two glasses, one chair pushed back, a candle extinguished. But nothing was the same anymore. Daniel sat on the edge of his bed later that night, his hands shaking. The storm had moved on, leaving only a low rumble in the distance. Guilt pressed against his ribs, suffocating. He stared at his reflection in the mirror. Eyes red, face pale, a man unrecognizable to himself. He wanted to believe it had been a mistake, a lapse of judgment, something that could be erased by morning. But deep down, he knew the truth. Once a line is crossed, there is no way back. In her room, Emily lay awake, eyes fixed on the ceiling. Tears slipped down her cheeks, silent and hot. She hated herself for not stopping it, hated him more for letting it happen. Yet beneath the confusion was something even worse, the part of her that had wanted to be wanted. Hours passed. Neither of them slept. The house was quiet except for the ticking clock, steady, merciless, counting down to what would come next. When dawn finally bled through the blinds, Daniel forced himself downstairs. The smell of rain lingered. Emily's door stayed closed. He brewed coffee, pretending life could return to normal. But guilt doesn't fade in daylight. It hides, waiting for the smallest sound to remind you it's still there. He heard Emily's footsteps on the stairs and froze. The moment their eyes met, both looked away. Words failed. Silence did what it always does. It buried the truth deeper. Outside, the storm clouds drifted east. Inside, another one began to form, quiet, invisible, deadly. Laura returned on a Sunday afternoon. The sky washed clean after days of rain. The house stood still, too quiet for her liking. She expected to find Daniel in the yard. Emily sprawled on the couch watching television. Instead, the front door opened into silence. "Hello?" she called out, setting her suitcase by the stairs. Daniel appeared from the kitchen, a smile too practiced, too quick. "Hey, you're back early. Client canceled," she said, brushing his shoulder with a kiss. "You look tired." "Didn't sleep well," he muttered. "Storm kept me up." He avoided her eyes. Upstairs, Emily's door was closed. Laura climbed halfway before pausing, hearing faint movement inside. Drawers opening, papers shifting, and something else. Hesitation. She knocked. "Em? You okay?" "Yeah," came a voice tight and distant. "Just unpacking." Laura frowned. Emily didn't sound like herself. Over dinner, conversation sputtered. Daniel pushed his food around. Emily barely ate. Laura tried to fill the silence, telling them about the canceled showing, about a couple who backed out of $1 million listing. No one laughed at her usual jokes. When Emily excused herself early, Laura turned to Daniel. "What's going on?" "She's just tired," he said quickly. "College stress, maybe." "Daniel, she's home for summer. She's supposed to relax. Maybe she misses her friends." His tone was final, like a door shutting. That night, Laura couldn't sleep. She wandered into the kitchen for water and found Daniel outside on the porch, cigarette in hand, something he'd quit years ago. The smoke curled into the dark, the ember flaring with each breath. "I thought you gave those up," she said softly. "Old habits," he replied. The quiet stretched between them. Crickets, the faint hum of the fridge inside, the sound of two people who'd run out of ways to reach each other. "You've been distant lately," she said. "Just work." "It's not just work." "Laura," he exhaled, eyes on the yard. "Can we not do this tonight?" She nodded, though her chest tightened with a familiar ache. They went to bed without another word. The next morning, Laura noticed the faint tension that shadowed every interaction. Emily flinching when Daniel entered the room, Daniel stiffening whenever she spoke to Emily. Something invisible and poisonous threaded through the air. At breakfast, Megan stopped by, Laura's best friend and neighbor, always armed with gossip and intuition sharper than most detectives. She leaned on the counter, chatting idly, eyes darting between Daniel and Emily. "Everyone looks cozy," she said with a half smile. "Just family time," Daniel replied. "Right?" Megan tilted her head. "You sure about that, Laura?" Laura laughed it off, but Megan's look lingered. That afternoon, Megan pulled her aside as Daniel went to the garage. "Something's off," she whispered. "She won't even look at him." "Teenagers," Laura said, though her voice wavered. "You're imagining things." "Maybe. Just keep your eyes open." Laura wanted to dismiss it, but later, while folding laundry, she found a crumpled sweatshirt on Emily's bed, Daniel's. The scent of his cologne clung faintly to it. Her hands froze. 100 explanations rushed through her mind, none of them fitting right. That night, she watched them from the kitchen window as Daniel handed Emily a glass of water. Nothing inappropriate, nothing overt, just a moment too careful, a space too charged. Something had changed in her home. She could feel it in the walls, in the air she breathed. As she lay in bed later, staring at the ceiling, her mind replayed Megan's words. Keep your eyes open. She would. And soon she would see everything. The days after Laura's return passed like slow-moving fog, heavy, silent, and suffocating. Nothing felt normal anymore. Emily barely left her room, and when she did, her eyes never met Daniel's. Laura sensed the weight of something unspoken, but every time she tried to name it, the truth slipped out of reach like smoke. Daniel buried himself in work. He left early, stayed late, avoided meals, and told himself that distance was safety, that silence could bury what had happened. But guilt doesn't stay quiet for long. It whispers, then grows louder, until it finds a way to escape. One evening, Emily sat in the campus cafe with her friend Sarah, pretending to study. The hum of conversation around them felt distant. Sarah noticed the way Emily's hands trembled when she reached for her coffee. "You look awful," Sarah said gently. "What's going on?" "It's nothing," Emily whispered. "Just family stuff." "Family stuff doesn't make you look like you haven't slept in a week." Emily stared at the table. Her throat tightened, tears threatening. For days, she had tried to keep it buried. The memory of that night, the shame that followed. But Sarah's concern broke something open. "I did something," Emily said, her voice shaking. "Something terrible." "What do you mean?" Emily hesitated, then told her. Not everything, not the whole twisted truth, but enough. She said she'd messed up with her stepdad, that she couldn't forgive herself, that she didn't know how to live with it. Her words came out in a rush, half choked by sobs. Sarah froze, eyes wide. She didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to comfort Emily, the other part wanted to run. You have to tell someone. That's not just." "No," Emily interrupted. "You can't. No one can know. But promise me, Sarah. Please." Sarah nodded, but fear flickered behind her eyes. Later that night, she told her boyfriend, Mark. She didn't mean to, it just slipped out during an argument. He called Daniel the creepy stepdad. And before she could stop herself, she said, "You have no idea how right you are." The silence that followed was electric. Mark demanded to know what she meant. When she refused, he guessed, and guessed right. By morning, Mark saw opportunity. He was broke, jobless, and desperate. To him, this wasn't a tragedy. It was leverage. That afternoon, Daniel returned home from work to find a folded note wedged under his windshield wiper. "I know what you did with your stepdaughter. $10,000 or everyone else will too." His stomach dropped. His hands trembled as he read it again and again, the words burning through his chest. He looked around the parking lot. Faces blurred, cars passed. No one looked suspicious. But someone knew. That night, Daniel sat in his office with the note spread across his desk, a bottle of bourbon beside it. Emily's laughter from that night echoed in his memory, twisted now into accusation. When she knocked softly on the door, he hid the note beneath a stack of papers. "You okay?" she asked, eyes red. "I'm fine," he lied. "Go to bed." But she didn't move. "You're lying." "Emily," he snapped, then softened. "Please, just don't ask." She hesitated, then left quietly, closing the door behind her. The moment she was gone, Daniel unfolded the note again. The words blurred through his tears. Panic, guilt, fear. They collided inside him until something inside cracked. He knew whoever sent that note wouldn't stop. Secrets have a way of growing teeth. Outside, the wind picked up, whistling through the trees. Inside, Daniel Hurst made a decision that would end one life and destroy every other connected to it. Daniel didn't sleep that night. The note sat on his desk like a loaded gun, silent, waiting. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the words again. "I know what you did." By morning, he'd convinced himself there was only one way to stop it. Pay the money, confront the man, make it go away. He couldn't let Laura find out. He couldn't let Emily's name be dragged through dirt. He told himself it was for her, but deep down it was for himself. The message came through later that day. An unknown number. Motel 7. Room 112. Bring the cash. 8 p.m. His heart pounded as he read it. He borrowed from his savings, stuffed $10,000 into an old briefcase, and left work early. On the drive there, his reflection in the windshield looked foreign. Sweat on his temples, eyes wild. The motel sat on the edge of town, its neon sign half dead, buzzing weakly in the evening rain. Daniel parked under a flickering light and checked the room number twice before knocking. The door opened to reveal a young man, maybe mid-20s, unshaven, smirking. Mark, Sarah's boyfriend. Mr. Hurst, Mark said casually, leaning against the frame. I didn't think you'd actually show. You know who I am? Daniel asked, voice trembling. Of course. Small town, big secrets. That's how it goes. Right? Mark's grin widened as he stepped aside, motioning Daniel in. The room smelled of beer and smoke. A cheap camera sat on the table, its red light blinking. You recording me? Daniel asked. Relax, Mark said. Just insurance. You don't pay, I upload. Simple business. Daniel placed the briefcase on the bed. His hands were shaking. There's your money. Now leave us alone. Oh, see. That's the problem, Mark said, flipping the latches open. This isn't enough. You think 10 grand buys silence forever? Daniel's stomach twisted. That's what you asked for. Yeah, and now I'm asking for more. 20 next time. Maybe 30. The anger built fast, climbing his throat like fire. You're destroying lives. Daniel snapped. She's just a girl who made a mistake? Mark interrupted. Sure, but the world's not kind to mistakes like hers, or yours. So either you keep paying, or I make sure everyone knows what kind of man you really are. Something in Daniel snapped. He lunged forward, grabbing Mark by the collar. The two stumbled against the dresser, sending bottles crashing to the floor. Mark laughed even as he fought back, enjoying the chaos. Go ahead, he taunted. Hit me. Let's see what Daddy's temper looks like. Daniel's fist shook. He wanted to walk away, to stop, but Mark's words kept slicing deeper. Emily cried when she told Sarah. Mark hissed. Guess you were that good, huh? The room went red. Daniel swung once, hard. The crack echoed through the walls. Mark fell back, hitting his head on the corner of the table. The sound that followed was sickening. A hollow thud, final and still. Daniel froze, breath ragged. No, 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 no. He knelt beside the body, shaking it. Mark didn't move. Blood trickled slowly across the dirty carpet. For a long moment, the only sound was the buzzing neon outside. He wiped his hands, heart pounding so loud it drowned out thought. He took the camera, smashed it against the floor, grabbed the briefcase, and stumbled out into the rain. Back in his car, he sat motionless, rain pelting the windshield. His reflection stared back, pale, broken, monstrous. He told himself it was self-defense, an accident, anything but what it really was. By the time he reached home, Emily was waiting by the window. She saw the blood on his shirt, the emptiness in his eyes, and knew. Neither spoke. They didn't have to. Outside, thunder rolled again. Distant this time, but coming closer. The rain hadn't stopped for 2 days. It beat against the house like it was trying to wash something away. But the stain inside wouldn't fade. Daniel barely spoke. He sat in his study for hours, curtains drawn, eyes fixed on nothing. Emily avoided him at first, afraid of what she might see in his face. But the silence became unbearable. She finally knocked. Dad? Can I come in? The word Dad caught in her throat. Heavy, conflicted, half a plea. Daniel looked up slowly, eyes hollow. You shouldn't call me that, he muttered. Her heart twisted. I don't know what else to call you. He turned away, his jaw trembling. You shouldn't have seen me like that. You shouldn't have known. I had to know, she whispered, stepping closer. I heard you leave that night. I followed you. I saw you go into that motel. Daniel's breath caught. You followed me? Emily nodded, tears threatening to spill. I thought maybe you were seeing someone else. I didn't know what was happening until I saw you come out, covered in blood. The air between them turned heavy. I didn't mean to kill him, Daniel said quietly. He came at me. It was an accident. Emily's voice broke. But you did. He's dead. And now everything's over, isn't it? He stood abruptly, pacing the room. No one knows. I took the camera. I wiped the room. It's done. But Emily shook her head. You don't get it. Sarah's been calling me nonstop. She says Mark disappeared. The police are already asking questions. Daniel stopped moving. For a second, neither breathed. What did you tell them? Nothing, she said. Not yet. The words not yet echoed like a ticking clock. Emily sank into the chair opposite him, hands trembling. I can't live like this. I can't eat, I can't sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see him. I see his blood on you. Emily sank into the chair opposite him, hands trembling. I can't live like this. I can't eat, I can't sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see him. I see his blood on you. Daniel moved closer, desperate. You can't tell anyone. If you confess, they'll destroy both of us. You understand? What happened between us. It already makes us monsters in their eyes. She met his gaze, tears spilling freely now. Maybe we are. He knelt before her, taking her hands. Emily, listen to me. We can move. Start over somewhere new. No one has to know. But she pulled away. Running won't fix what we did. You killed him because of me. Her voice cracked on the last word. The truth of it sat heavy in the room. Daniel tried to reach for her again, but she stood, shaking her head. I loved you, she whispered, voice trembling. God help me. I loved you, but it's wrong. It's always been wrong. And now he's dead because of it. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. Please, Emily, don't say that. Don't leave me. She stepped back toward the door. I'm not leaving you. I'm saving us. He frowned, confused. What do you mean? But Emily didn't answer. She turned, fled down the hallway, and disappeared into her room, locking the door. Moments later, Daniel heard muffled sobs, and the sound of her dialing a number. He pressed his ear to the door. Her voice, quiet and shaking, bled through the wood. Detective Harris? It's Emily Hurst. I need to tell you something about Mark Carter. Daniel's knees went weak. His breath came in ragged bursts as he stumbled backward, realization dawning too late. She was confessing, not just to Mark's death, but to everything. He collapsed into the hallway, staring at the door that separated them. His whole world, his perfect, broken world, was about to end. Outside, the storm began to fade. The rain slowed to a whisper, as if the sky itself was holding its breath for what would come next. The morning after Emily's call, the world seemed unnaturally quiet. The storm had passed, but the air in the Hurst home was suffocating, heavy with something worse than rain. Guilt had settled like fog over every room. Daniel sat at the kitchen table, staring at his coffee as if it might offer forgiveness. The cup trembled in his hands. Every sound, the ticking clock, the creak of the floor, made him flinch. When the knock came, he already knew who it was. 2 detectives stood at the door. The older one, Detective Harris, wore a weary look, the kind you only get after years of seeing what people do to each other. The younger, Officer Lane, kept his eyes sharp, observant. Mr. Hurst, Harris said politely, we'd like to ask a few questions about Mark Carter. Daniel tried to steady his voice. Of course. Come in. As they entered, he noticed Emily at the top of the stairs, pale and shaking. Their eyes met briefly, hers full of regret, his full of disbelief. You told them, his gaze said. She looked away. In the living room, Harris flipped open a small notebook. You knew Mark Carter? Barely, Daniel said quickly. He dated my stepdaughter's friend. I met him once or twice. Harris nodded slowly. And when was the last time you saw him? Daniel hesitated. He could feel Emily's presence just beyond the doorway. A few weeks ago, I think. He came by the house once. The detective leaned forward. We have a statement from your stepdaughter that says otherwise. Daniel's heart stopped. A statement? Harris studied him carefully. She said she saw you meet Mark the night he disappeared. At the Highway Motel. Room 112. The silence that followed was deafening. Daniel's fingers clenched around the cup until it cracked. She's mistaken, he whispered. We found blood in that room, Harris continued. A lot of it. The lab's running tests. We'll know soon enough. Daniel's throat went dry. The walls seemed to close in. Emily's voice echoed faintly from the hallway. A sob she couldn't hold back. Harris turned toward the sound. Is she okay? Daniel forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. She's been through a lot. The detectives exchanged a look. They knew something was off. When they finally left, promising to follow up soon, Daniel shut the door and leaned against it, breathing hard. Emily emerged slowly, tears streaming down her face. I didn't mean for it to happen like that, she whispered. I just wanted to tell the truth. I thought they'd understand. Daniel's face twisted in anguish. You betrayed me, Emily. After everything. After what we shared. It wasn't love, Daniel, she said, shaking her head. It was a lie we both wanted to believe. Her words hit like a blade. He staggered back, unable to speak. Emily stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. They're going to find out. You can't hide it anymore. He looked up at her, eyes hollow. And what about you? You think they'll believe you're innocent? For a moment, neither moved. The truth hung between them, raw, unforgiving. Then Emily turned and walked away, leaving him alone in the silence of their ruined home. Daniel's hands trembled as he sank to the floor. The cup shards cut into his palm, but he didn't flinch. Pain was all he had left, the only thing that still felt real. Outside, a police car lingered down the street, watching. The walls of his life were closing in, and this time, there was nowhere left to run. The next 48 hours felt like a lifetime. The house that once held laughter now echoed with silence, the kind that follows ruin. Daniel barely slept, pacing the floorboards until dawn, haunted by memories that refused to fade. Emily stayed locked in her room. He could hear her crying sometimes, her voice muffled through the walls. By morning, the tension broke. A knock thundered through the house, hard and deliberate. Daniel froze. He already knew. When he opened the door, Detective Harris stood there again, his expression grim, a folder clutched in his hand. Behind him, 2 uniformed officers waited. Daniel Hurst, Harris said, voice flat. We have a warrant for your arrest in connection with the disappearance and possible homicide of Mark Carter. The words cut through him like glass. You're making a mistake, Daniel said weakly. It was an accident. You can explain that downtown, Harris interrupted, signaling the officers. As they stepped forward, Emily appeared at the top of the stairs, pale and trembling. Wait, please, she cried. He didn't mean to. You don't understand. But Harris didn't look at her. Miss Hurst, I think you've said enough. Anything else could be used in court. The click of the handcuffs was louder than thunder. Cold metal against skin. Final. Daniel's heart pounded as the officers led him toward the door. Emily, he said softly, turning once. Whatever happens, don't let them twist what we had. You know the truth. She broke down completely. There is no truth anymore, she whispered. The world outside was watching. Neighbors lined their porches, whispering, phones raised. The perfect family everyone envied had become the latest scandal, living proof that evil could wear a smile. Rain began to fall again as Daniel was pushed into the back of the police car. Through the window, he saw Emily collapse against the doorway, sobbing into her hands. At the station, everything moved in slow motion. Fingerprints, photographs, a cold room with a single table. Harris sat across from him, setting down a manila folder. We found Mark Carter's blood in your car trunk, he said evenly, mixed with your DNA. Care to explain that? Daniel swallowed hard. He attacked me. I tried to stop him. It was self-defense. Then why didn't you call it in? Harris asked. Daniel looked away. You wouldn't understand. Try me. Silence. Daniel finally met his eyes. He was blackmailing me. About Emily. About something that never should have happened. I thought if I paid him, it would end. But it didn't. Harris leaned back, expression unreadable. So you're admitting you had an inappropriate relationship with your stepdaughter? Daniel's breath caught. I'm saying I made a mistake. Terrible one. But I didn't mean to kill him. Harris closed the folder. Intent or not, a man's dead and you buried it with lies. That's not a mistake, Mr. Hurst. That's a crime. Daniel's face drained of color. For the first time, he saw his reflection in the one-way glass. Tired, broken, monstrous. The man staring back wasn't the father he once was. Outside the room, Emily sat in the hallway, clutching her arms tightly, her face pale with guilt. She'd thought telling the truth would save them. Instead, it had destroyed everything. As Daniel was led past her in handcuffs, their eyes met one last time, full of things neither could say. I'm sorry, she whispered. Daniel didn't respond. He just kept walking, the echo of his footsteps fading into the sterile hallway. 3 months later, the courtroom was packed. The air was thick with whispers, tension, and judgment. The case of Daniel Hurst versus the state had become the town's obsession. A scandal that stripped away every illusion of decency the Hursts once had. Reporters lined the benches, cameras flashing as Daniel was let in, his orange jumpsuit stark under the fluorescent lights. His once proud shoulders were slumped now, the confident family man reduced to a shadow. He avoided looking at the gallery, but he didn't have to. He knew Emily was there. At the witness stand, Emily Hurst sat trembling. Her hands were clasped tightly, knuckles white. She looked older somehow, not in age but in weight. Guilt had aged her. Miss Hurst, the prosecutor began. Can you describe your relationship with the defendant prior to the incident? Emily hesitated. The room waited. He was my stepfather, she said softly. But after my mom died, things changed. A hush fell over the room. Changed how? The prosecutor asked. Her throat tightened. He was kind to me, protective. I trusted him. But one night, that trust turned into something else. Daniel closed his eyes. Every word she spoke felt like a blade. Did you feel coerced? No, she whispered. I wasn't forced, but I wasn't free either. I was grieving, lonely. He knew that. The prosecutor nodded gravely. And when Mark Carter discovered the relationship, Emily's voice cracked. He said he'd expose us. He wanted money. I told Daniel, and he said he'd take care of it. The next day, Mark was gone. The courtroom murmured. The judge's gavel struck for silence. Daniel's defense attorney rose for cross-examination. Miss Hurst, he said carefully, you've testified that you loved your stepfather at one point, correct? Emily looked down. Yes. And you still believe the death of Mark Carter was an accident? Tears welled in her eyes. I want to believe that, but I don't know anymore. The lawyer stepped closer. Did Daniel ever threaten you? Ever harm you? She shook her head. No, he never hurt me. He hurt himself more than anyone. In the gallery, a woman gasped quietly. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath. The prosecutor rose again. So, Miss Hurst, are you saying Daniel Hurst deserves sympathy? Emily hesitated, eyes flicking toward Daniel for the first time. Their gazes met, broken, familiar, heavy with everything unsaid. I'm saying, she whispered, we both deserve punishment. Her words hung in the air like smoke. When she stepped down, Daniel finally looked up. For a fleeting moment, their eyes locked again. Not with love this time, but recognition. Two people bound by the same sin, each trapped in their own hell. Later, Daniel took the stand. His lawyer urged him to stay quiet, but he refused. I have to speak, he said hoarsely. I can't let her carry it alone. He faced the jury, voice trembling. I didn't plan to kill Mark Carter, but I did, and I lied about it. I thought I was protecting Emily, But I was only protecting myself. I destroyed my family. I betrayed everything I was supposed to be. He looked at Emily again, tears blurring his vision. She didn't ruin me. I ruined her. Silence blanketed the courtroom. Even the prosecutor didn't move. When the judge finally called recess, Daniel was led away. Emily remained seated, staring at the empty stand where he'd just been. She felt no relief, only the crushing weight of truth. Outside, the reporters shouted questions, flashes bursting like gunfire. But inside that courtroom, time had stopped, frozen on two souls finally stripped bare before the world. The courthouse was silent when the jury returned. 12 faces, pale and unreadable, filed back into the room. Daniel sat motionless at the defense table, hands clasped tightly, eyes fixed on the wood grain before him. He could hear the faint click of the judge's gavel, the shuffling of papers, sounds that felt miles away. Emily sat in the front row, twisting a tissue in her hands. She hadn't slept in days. Every nightmare ended the same, with her stepfather's voice echoing, "You know the truth." The bailiff called for order as the foreman rose, envelope in hand. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" the judge asked. "We have, Your Honor." The courtroom seemed to shrink as the foreman unfolded the paper. Every heartbeat thundered like a drum. "On the charge of second-degree murder in the death of Mark Carter," he read, "we find the defendant, Daniel Hurst, guilty." The word guilty rang through the courtroom like a church bell. Emily gasped, covering her mouth. Daniel didn't move. His lawyer placed a trembling hand on his shoulder, but Daniel's eyes were locked straight ahead, empty, unblinking. The judge spoke solemnly. "Mr. Hurst, this court sentences you to 25 years in state prison, with no possibility of parole for 15. The gavel struck. Final. A low murmur spread across the room. The cameras flashed, capturing every tear, every shiver. To the public, it was justice. To Emily, it was the sound of her heart cracking in two. As the deputies approached, Daniel finally turned toward her. For the first time in weeks, their eyes met without glass, without pretense. He managed a faint, broken smile. "It's okay," he whispered as they cuffed his wrists. It had to end somewhere. Emily stood as he was led past her. "I'm sorry," she cried softly. "I never wanted this." Daniel paused. For a brief, fragile moment he almost reached out, but the officers pulled him away before he could. Outside, rain began to fall again, streaking the courthouse windows like tears from the sky. The storm had returned, as if echoing everything neither of them could say aloud. Reporters swarmed the steps, shouting questions that blurred together. Was it love or manipulation? Do you feel justice was served? Is Emily Hurst complicit? Emily didn't answer. She just walked past them, head low, her mother's old locket clenched in her fist. She'd come seeking closure, but all she felt was hollow. Behind her, Daniel was loaded into the transport van. He glanced out the window once more, watching Emily disappear into the gray rain. Inside the van, he let out a long, trembling breath. The truth was out. The weight was gone. But the emptiness it left behind was unbearable. He thought of the life he'd ruined, the woman he'd failed, and the daughter he'd loved in all the wrong ways. In the courthouse corridor, Emily stopped before a mirror. Her reflection stared back, pale, haunted. She whispered to it, voice cracking, "It's over." But even she didn't believe the words, because somewhere deep down she knew, stories like theirs never really end. They linger. They rot quietly beneath the surface, waiting to be unearthed again. As thunder rolled in the distance, Emily stepped outside into the rain, the courthouse fading behind her. Somewhere inside, the echoes of guilty still rang. Not just for Daniel, but for her too. 6 months after the verdict, the Hurst house stood empty. The grass had grown tall, the paint had started to peel, and the once bright curtains now hung limp and gray. Neighbors avoided looking at it when they passed. Some said they still heard voices at night, faint crying, the echo of a family that no longer existed. Emily hadn't returned since the day of the sentencing. She'd moved into a small apartment across town, but nothing there felt like home. The silence was worse than the whispers. Every creak of the floor reminded her of him. Every reflection seemed to hold his shadow. She tried to start over, new job, new city plans, but guilt clung to her like a second skin. No matter how far she went, the past followed. Some nights, she'd wake gasping, certain she could hear Daniel's voice calling her name. Then, one gray afternoon, a letter arrived. The handwriting was unmistakable, firm, deliberate, haunted. From Daniel Hurst, inmate number 40281. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Emily, I spent every day replaying what happened. The trial, the confession, the look on your face when they took me away. I thought prison would punish me, but it's nothing compared to living with what I did to you. They call me a monster here. Maybe they're right. But sometimes, when it's quiet, I remember when you were 12, before everything fell apart. You used to leave drawings on my desk. You trusted me, and I ruined that. If I could undo it, I would. But all I can do now is hope you find peace. Even if that peace means forgetting I ever existed. Don't visit me. Don't write back. Just live. Daniel. Tears blurred the ink before she finished reading. For a long time, she sat motionless, the paper trembling in her hands. He was gone from her life, but never from her mind. That night, she drove back to the old house. The police tape had been taken down, the locks replaced, but her key still fit. The moment she stepped inside, the air felt heavy, like the walls themselves remembered. She wandered through the rooms. The living room where they'd once eaten together, the hallway where her mother's laughter had echoed, the study where Daniel had kept his secrets. Everything smelled of dust and regret. In the corner of his desk drawer, she found a photograph. The three of them smiling, back when they'd pretended to be a family. Her mother's arm around Daniel, her own eyes full of innocence. She sank to the floor, clutching the picture to her chest, and for the first time in months, she let herself sob. Outside, the wind howled through broken shutters, whispering like a confession. When she finally stood, she placed the photograph on the mantel, beside a burned-out candle. I forgive you, she whispered to the emptiness, but I'll never forget. As she left, she didn't look back. The door closed softly behind her, and the sound seemed to echo through the house, one last heartbeat before silence returned. Later that night, a light flickered in the study window. Some neighbors swore they saw a figure standing there. A man, head bowed, staring out into the rain. But the house remained empty. Only the echoes stayed. It was spring again. The air smelled of rain and jasmine, and the city had already forgotten the Hurst case. Headlines had faded, and the public had moved on to newer scandals. But for Emily, time hadn't healed. It had only softened the sharpest edges of her pain. She worked at a small bookstore now, tucked between a florist and a cafe. Her days were quiet, predictable, the kind of peace she once thought she'd never find. Yet sometimes, as she restocked shelves or watched raindrops slide down the glass, her mind wandered back to him. Daniel's final letter remained locked in her drawer. She hadn't thrown it away, not out of love, but because it was proof of the truth she survived. Proof that even monsters could feel remorse. Every so often, she drove past the old house. Nature had begun reclaiming it. Ivy climbing the porch, weeds pushing through the path. The windows were boarded, but in her mind, the walls still breathed. They whispered of secrets buried beneath wallpaper and wood, of love turned rotten, and trust turned fatal. That night, as she stood by the shore, watching waves crash against the rocks, she whispered a quiet goodbye to both of them, her mother, and the man who had destroyed them all. I'm done carrying you, she said to the wind. The moonlight caught her face, no longer the haunted girl from the trial, but a woman who had lived through the fire and stepped out scarred, yet standing. Somewhere far away, a prison cell door slammed shut, and for the first time in years, Emily didn't flinch. She just kept walking into the dawn. In the end, the Hurst family became a story whispered in small towns and retold in true crime circles. A tragedy born not from hatred, but from a love that should never have been. Daniel Hurst remains behind bars, serving life without parole. Those who've met him say he speaks little, but spends hours in silence, staring through his cell window as if watching a home that no longer exists. Laura's memory lives on in police files and photographs, frozen in time, smiling beside the man who would one day destroy her family. And Emily, she survived. But survival, for her, doesn't mean forgetting. Every breath she takes is a reminder that the line between love and obsession is paper thin. And once it's crossed, nothing innocent remains. Soft piano fades in. Camera pans over the empty house, the flickering porch light, then to the ocean. The house on Maple Street still stands, abandoned, unforgiven. Some say they hear voices there. Faint laughter, a man's whisper, a young woman's cry. Maybe it's just the wind. Or maybe some walls remember the sins they've witnessed. In every town, behind every perfect family portrait, there are stories we'll never know. And sometimes, the echoes never fade. Music swells. Screen fades to black. Text appears. Inspired by true events.